Everything should be better today. Today, Daf Be'ezus Hashem is Daf Pei Hey. We're going to start from Pei Dalet Amid Beis by the Gufa. Very simple. We know that a kosher kohen, a regular kohen, is not permitted to marry a chalala. A chalala is a girl who is the product of a bad marriage. What bad marriage? For example, her father is a kohen, and he married a grusha, or her father was the kohen gadol, and he married an almana. So she is in essence chalala. Chalala means like halal loses it's like a kohen with an empty suit. In other words, they don't have kedusha, and she also is a kohenes that loses her kedusha's kahuna. So you would think, okay, what's the problem? They're diseased people, so to speak, and the Torah says that a regular kohen is not permitted to marry a chalala, a girl from such a product of a marriage. So now the Gemara is discussing, what about the other way around? A kohenes, a regular kohenes, the daughter of a kohen, can she marry a chalal? Can she marry a chalal? The same way you're saying a kosher kohen cannot marry a chalala, how about a kohenes marrying a chalal? The opposite way. A chalal, again, is somebody from a man from a product of a marriage, like, again, a kohen who's the offspring of a kohen that married a grusha, so to speak. So he's a chalal. So gufa, here we are. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav, Yehuda said in the name of Rav, Loi huzharu kasheris lihi nasei lepsulim. A kohenes has no prohibition for marrying somebody who's puzzle. So what the Gemara is basically saying, a kohenes doesn't have those same restrictions that a kohen has. A kohen cannot marry a chalal, but the opposite case, a kohenes could marry a chalal. Okay? Lema Messiah le. Let us bring a proof from our Mishnah to the statement of Rav Yehuda Marav. One of the cases that our Mishnah discussed is this case over here. The Mishnah was discussing cases whereby a woman is permitted to her husband and not permitted to the Yevama. So what's the case? One of the cases is case number 2. A cholol, right on your screen, shenasa kashera, a cholol that married a kosher kohen. A cholol kohen married a kashera. In this case, she was permitted to be with her husband. And she has a brother that's a kohen, regular kohen. So when she will fall to Yibam, she becomes a chalala, because once she married the husband, who was a chalal, she automatically becomes a chalala. So by the time she falls to Yibam, she's not permitted to the ach kohen kosher. That's what we said. So we see from there that it's a permitted marriage. The Gemara understood that the keshera, that the chalal married a kohenes, and the Mishnah calls it a good marriage. That's what he says. My love, kohenes, didn't the chalal marry a regular kohenes? Haru'uyalai. That's appropriate for him, and therefore, and it's a kosher marriage. So we see that a kohenes is not prohibited from marrying a chalal. Answers the Gemara, my keshera l'kuna doesn't mean kosher. Means she's a kohenes. She's a kosher kohenes. The Gemara says, "Loi," it doesn't mean that. Yisraelis. It's talking about the chalal marrying a Yisraelis. There, a chalal could marry Yisraelis. The only question was whether the kohenes should not marry a chalal. So you don't have a proof from a Mishnah, because a Mishnah may be talking about the chalal marrying the Yisraelis. Umay kashera. Why do you call these Yisraelis a kashera? Because kashera la kahal, she's permitted to marry anybody. She's a regular woman. She's not a mamzeres. That's what we mean. The chalal that marries a kashera means she married a regular woman, a regular bas Yisrael. But it's no proof, because there is a possibility that a kohenes would not be permitted to marry this chalal. So the Gemara asks, if this is so, yesh lo ach kohen kosher name. When the Mishnah says that this case, if the brother was a brother kosher, what does it mean? Kosher l'kal. That the brother is a person that is permitted to marry. He's permitted to marry a Jew. So michlal, that means the chalal himself, pasal l'kal. is not permitted to marry a Jew. That's not true. A cholol is not prohibited from marrying anybody. So what is that? What does that mean? Elalav, the word kosher in the Mishnah means kohen, and it's another way of saying a kohen. Emidahu kohen, since the brother you're calling a kohen, so the Yevama herself, he kohenes, must be a kohenes. So what the Gemara is just saying right now is that this case of cholol married a kashera must be talking about a cholol marrying a kohenes, because ach kohen kosher is talking about kosher means kohen. So kashera means kohenes, and we see that a kohenes could marry a cholol. Answers the Gemara, no, the area, who said so? Hakadisa v'hakadisa. What the case of the brother, actually he's a kohen. The case of the woman, she's not a kohen, she's Israelis, and kashera means kosher lekahal, and by the kohen it means kosher kohen, but you don't have a direct definitive proof from our Mishnah either way. New Gemara. The Gemara tries to prove the point again. Masiv Ravim Barav Nachman. He asked the question. The pasuk says, "Isha grusha miikachu lo yikachu." It says lo yikachu twice, right? So in the psukim it says twice lo yikachu about a kohen not marrying certain people, right? So Isha Zaina v'Chalal lo yikachu, Isha grusha meisha lo yikachu. That's the pasuk. So Malame, this teaches us Shohi Isha Muzaris Al Yadei Ish. The lo yikachu twice is a lav. Not only can a kohen not marry a grusha, but a kohenes, let's say a kohenes would not marry a gorish, or a kohenes can't marry a cholol. That's the same thing. That's what the Brisa seems to trying to say. That a woman also has, a kohenes also has the same prohibitions on marriage like a kohen does. Answers the Gemara, Amarava, not so. What the Gemara means is that whenever he's doing a bad thing, for example, let's say the kohen is marrying a grusha, so he's doing an aveira, he musaris, she's also getting an aveira. That's what's trying to tell you. When he has no problem with the marriage, he loy mizhara, he's not. She doesn't get a lav. She doesn't have an issa to marry. So a cholol marrying a kohenes, since he has no lav, a cholol technically is an empty kohen. He can marry anybody. She has no problem marrying the cholol. So, but the pasuk, what it's trying to tell you is that when you tell me that a kohen has certain ladies that he can't marry, it's not just saying that he gets an aveira for marrying. It's the pasuk is saying that she also gets an aveira for marrying, because if he has an aveira, she also has an aveira. So the Gemara, so basically, is saying that women have the same punishments and same prohibitions as men. For hamahachanafka, is you learn it from that pasuk. Midrav Yehuda Amarav Nafki, you have another source that teaches you that men and women are equal when it comes to punishments. The Amarav Yehuda Amarav v'chein toned Rabbi Yishmael, ish oy isha ki ya'asu mikol chatois ha'odam. Any man or woman that does any of the prohibitions, they get an aveira, so hishva hakashiv. The pasuk equates isha leish. A woman is like a man l'chol einashin shebeTorah. Any punishment in the Torah, lav, kares, even though the Torah is written masculine, so you would think it's only talking to males. No, one pasuk tells you that the whole Torah really applies to male and females. So if that's the case, why do I need this pasuk lo yukachu to teach you that a woman gets an aveira? If the man's getting an aveira for this marriage, she also gets an aveira for the marriage. I don't need that pasuk to teach you that. So the Gemara says, if it was just this pasuk, isha, I would think that women and men are equal when it comes to a law that applies universally by every type of Jew, right? But a law that does not apply by everybody. The law of marrying a grusha only applies by a kohen. So I might think only the kohen marrying a grusha gets the aveira, but the grusha herself doesn't get aveira from staying married to the kohen. Loi. I might have thought not so. There's no aveira for that. That's why you need the pasuk lo yikachu. We'll go to Amud Aleph, Hey on Amud Aleph. So you're saying that, but so Gemara asks the question. Bahare tum'ah, the lav she'ena shava b'kol. Tum'ah is a lav. Tuma means that you can't go to a kohen cannot go into a beis hakvaros. It's a law that is not equal for all Jews. It only applies to a kohen. And the Torah tells you that women don't have this prohibition. A woman could go into a cemetery. The Talmud Bavli Daf, the Torah wrote B'nei Aharon v'loy b'noi Saharon, that the halacha of Tumah only applies to kohanim, but not to the women kohanim. If I wouldn't have that pasuk, Hava Mina, I would say Noshim Chayavis. Noshim would be obligated in this law of not being metama lemesim. My time out la mishum de Rabbi Yehuda Marav, because I have the source of Rabbi Yehuda Marav, who said the second source, Isha kisayasim kol chatas adam, women and men are equal. So we see that the Rabbi Yehuda Marav applied by any type of lav, a lav hashava bakal, and even lav that only applies to kahanim, men and women are equal. So again, then you ask the question, if that's the case, then what do I need lo yikachu, lo yikachu? And why do I need lo yikachu, lo yikachu? If Rabbi Yehuda Marav is talking about both lav shava bakal, lav she'ena shava bakal. Answers the Gemara loy. The gamrinim lo yikachu. The reason why I need b'nei Aharon, b'loy b'noi Saharon, because I would have learned from lo yikachu, but that even a lav she'ena shava bakal, there that it would apply by Tumah. I would think that Tumah would also apply by Benois Kahanim. That's why I need this pasuk Bnei Aharon v'loy Benois Aharon to exclude kohenes from being metama l'mesim. Ika de Amri, others say the Amri kicha the Amri Ika de Amri, others say kicha itzrachalei. I learn lav hashava bakal, lav she'ena shava bakal, all from Rabbi Yehuda Marav, that men and women are equal. But I need the pasuk of the opposite way. I need the pasuk of lo yikach lo yikachu, because salka daita chamina ligba betuma. I would think that by kahenes or anything by lav she'ena shava bakal, you learn it from tuma. Anything that has to do with kohen, women have no punishment on it. For example, if a woman a grusha would marry a kohen, I would think just like women are not involved in the tumas mason that apply by kahanim. They're permitted to go into the cemetery. So I might think a grusha marrying a kohen doesn't get an avera. That's why you need kamash milan that lo yikachu, that even the grusha gets an avera. Bottom line is what we're trying to say over here. The bottom line is we don't have a question on the main teaching that we have over here, that a kohenes is permitted to marry a cholol. That is permitted. Only a kosher kohen is not allowed to marry a chalolah, but a kohenes is permitted to marry a cholol. Rav Papa, Rav Huna b'Rav Yeshua, Ikle lehinsavi, la'asrei Rav Idi bar Avin. They were a guest in this place called Rav Papa and Rav Huna, and this was this place where Rav Idi bar Avin was the rabbi. So they asked Rav Idi bar Avin, who? Rav Papa and Rav Huna. They asked him, can a regular kohenes marry somebody who's puzzle? Again, can a kohenes marry a cholol or not? Amalahu Rav Papa. So, wait. Now, they were asking Rav Papa. The people were asking Rav Papa. Not that they were asking Rav Idi bar Avin. They were asking Rav Papa and Rav Huna, what's your thought here? Because they were guests, so they asked the scholar in residence, what's your opinion? Amalahu Rav Papa said to Niseyu, I have an open Mishnah that seems to say that. Asari Yaksin Olam Ababal. When they came up in the second Commonwealth, when Ezra decided to rebuild the second Beis Hamikdash, they were building the second Beis Hamikdash, so then 10 types of people came up, 10 types of Jews, Kehanim, Levim, Yisraelim, Chalolim, Gerim, Charurim, or slaves that got freed, Mamzerim, Nesin, Shuki, Abasufi. All these types of people came up. It wasn't just one unified group that came up. Basically, most people wanted to stay in Bavel and not rebuild the second Beis Hamikdash. So he had trouble gathering a group of people, and he ended up getting a few from everybody. But anyway, he had a lot of Mamzerim coming there with him as well. Kahanim Levim, so the Mishnah says, Kahanim Levim Yisraelim, a rule of marriage is like this: Kohanim Levim Yisraelim. Anybody belonging to the group of Kohanim Levim Yisraelim, mutar lovei zeh b'zeh. They can marry each other. A Yisrael can marry a Kohen can marry Yisraelis, and Levim can marry a Kohen or marry Yisraelis. It goes; they can marry each other. Levim Yisraelim chalolim gerim. Notice this word chalolim, a Kohen that lost his kedusha. Gerim karurim. Mutaran lovei zeh b'zeh. A chalol can marry a Levi or a Yisrael, a Yisraelis. Gerim mutar lovei zeh b'zeh. Right? So we'll notice right over here, it does a chalol can marry a Levi, a Yisrael, but it doesn't say a chalol can marry a kohenes, because so we have a proof from this Mishnah, the opposite, that a chalol cannot marry a kohenes. That's what the Gemara is going to say. These are mutar lamsav zeh. Geri charura mamzer nesine shtuki vasus mutar lamsav zeh. But the bottom line is the ilu kohenes lechalol loikatani. It doesn't say that the chalol could marry a kohenes. It doesn't say that in the Mishnah. So we see that it would be prohibited for a kohenes to marry a chalol. Amalei Rav Huna Bar Yeshua, so Rav Huna Bar Yeshua spoke up. No, that's no proof from that Mishnah. Kol heicha detani nasmi mahani bahani nasmi mahani. If it could cut both ways, katani, then it says it. So therefore, when you're saying like Kahan Nevi'im Yisraelim, it doesn't matter male or female from Kohanim, male or female from Levi, male or female of Yisrael, they each can marry each other. But here it would be exception. The reason why it doesn't say Kohanim, because true, a chalal can marry a kohenes, but it wouldn't be true that a kohen can marry a chalalah. So that's why it doesn't say that. Since kimin di libayla mitzvah chalalah, asirulite, since they would say the opposite, a kohen marrying a chalal, that would not work. Like a tani, it doesn't mix in the word kohen in that middle case. Anyway, also lakama, here's the bottom line and the psak of the sugya. Also, the comment of Rav Idi bar Ovid. Finally, after discussion, Rav Papa and Rav Huna, they finally asked to pose the question of Rav Idi bar Ovid. Amalahu, he said, Dardake, my children. Hachik Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav. Rav Yehuda said it, and that's definitive. Loi who's haru kasheris li nosei lipsulem. A kohenes is not prohibited from marrying a chalal. That's the end of the story. That's it. Kohen is not allowed to marry chalal, but a kohenes is permitted to marry a chalal. Next Gemara, new Gemara. In the Mishnah it says, Mishnah says, Shnias medivrei seifrim. That means that if, look, remember the Mishnah, so let's just get the case of the Mishnah. That sometimes you have a man marrying his maternal grandmother, right in the picture over here. Reuven married his mother's mother, Rivka, and this is a shnia. That's only asur d'rabbanan. When he dies, since technically Shimon could now do yibam Rivka, even though Reuven made an illegal marriage midrabbanan, but the lady is not prohibited on Shimon, so Shimon could marry do yibam on Rivka. Now, the Gemara continues. He says, the people of Biri asked a question from Rav Sheshes. Let's say there was a shnia, she was also to the first husband, but she's not also to the second husband. Like in the case I just showed you. When the yavam does yibam on her, will she get her ksuba? In other words, her first marriage was be'isser, yet when she's forced to yibam, she's permitted, right? Because it's not his grandmother, and so will she get a ksuba? What's the question? When you're married, of course you get a ksuba. No, by yavam, it's different. Kevin da Amamar, we learned in the Masechta, ksubasa, when someone does yibam, who pays for the ksuba? Al nichsei bala harishan. It belongs to the possessions of the deceased husband. So therefore, since her first husband was an illegal marriage, whenever there's an illegal marriage, there is no ksuba, less law. So even after you did yibam, she would not get a ksuba. There wouldn't be no ksuba. So in this case, if Shimon would do yibam to Rivka, there would be no ksuba, because Reuven was not supposed to marry Rivka, and she lost her ksuba by the first marriage. That's what the Gemara says. Or a dilma maybe kivem the ili less law midrisha takino rabban masheni isla. Since not always does the yavam do we take the ksuba from the possessions of the first husband. If the first husband died a poor man, then the second one is obligated to give ksuba. And since by the second one it's a kosher marriage, so he would be required to give a ksuba. Amaluhu Rav Sheshes says this is a brisa tenisio ksubasa al nichse balarisha. Normally by a yibum, the ksuba is paid for by the possessions of the first husband. But if the first husband was a shnia, was aser, for example, it was his grandmother, then when she gets married, for the yavam, she will not get ksuba if he does yibum to her, because she was married during her first marriage to the shnia. It was an illegal marriage, so therefore she lost the ksuba even if he would do yibum. So the Gemara just wants to do housekeeping, explaining the brisa clearly. Bichlal, the Ika, the Islam Yavim, some do get a ksuba from the Yavim. You always told me that who pays for the ksuba is the first husband. So why do you tell me you don't get ksuba from the second husband? He never pays. No, sometimes he does pay. Sometimes it's missing something. Normal Yibum cases, ksubasai al nichse balarisha. The husband, first husband pays the ksuba. He's dead. You take it from his possessions. The less lamirishan. If the first husband died penniless, takini lamisheni. Then the yavam has to come up and cough up the money to pay for ksuba. But if in the first case, if with the yavama, she was a shnia to her first husband, then when she gets married, when she does yibum, when the yavam does yibum with her, she would not get ksuba from the second husband, because the first husband already, she had an illegal marriage. We learned in the Mishnah, new question. If a strange thing, and we're going to discuss this at length. But first, let's clear up one halacha. We learned in the Mishnah that let's say a kohen marries a grusha, or almana marries a kohen gadol. So even though it's an illegal marriage, when they get divorced, he has to pay ksuba. Okay? That's what the Mishnah says. What happens? Does he have to feed her while they're married? Because really, we want these people to get divorced. So is he required to feed her and give her mazonos? That's the question. Okay? Illegal marriages. Yesh lehem mazonos. Is the husband obligated to feed her? Now, he would be obligated to feed her because he's giving her ksuba, and part of the ksuba is part of the contract says that while they're married, he's required to feed her. So the Gemara says like this: Hey chidami, that they're staying married and you're requiring the husband to feed her. We're trying to get them divorced. You're going to say that the husband should feed her and provide food for her? We'd rather him not, so that she can get divorced. So she would want the man divorced. Like the husband went across country and he's not around. So the love of achla, and she borrowed from somebody else for her food bills. Now, normal when a husband goes across country to the Orient and the wife borrows money so she can eat, when the husband comes back, he has to pay back that obligation, what she borrowed. My Mizoina tonight, in this case, really, when he went to Medina Siyam, they're not living with each other. So Mizoina tonight ksuba ninhu umidi is like ksuba is like Mizoina. So Mizoina, in the case of the kohen, married the grusha. Since he's supposed to pay a ksuba if they got divorced, so while they're married, and he's not here, but while they're married, he should be responsible for her mezainis. Dilma, only ksuba de lemishpal umeka, she takes it and leaves. Isla. Mezaina dilma tiakav gabe lesla. If we allowed her to have mezainis, maybe she'll stay. So therefore, we tell her, no, you don't get mezainis. You don't get fed by this husband. Amalei. So this was a question to Rabbi Yochanan. Amalei. So Rabbi Yochanan answered, lesla. She doesn't have mezainis. Okay. So the Gemara asks, Rav Leza asks back, V'tanya yeshla, don't we have a brisa that says she does have mezainis? And says the Gemara, Ki tanyahi la'achar misa. Very interesting. After he dies, as long as she didn't collect her ksuba, she can collect mezainis. She can still eat a supper from his possessions. And so it's a funny thing. While the kohen who's married to the gerusha is alive, he doesn't have to feed her. If he dies, so then she could demand she wants to be fed and not collect her ksuba. And that's what it means. Isti amal, others say, Amalei, Rabbi Yochanan said, Tanya Yeshla. Rabbi Yochanan said, just the opposite, that even while they're married, she still gets ksuba. So the Gemara, so Rabbi Leza asked him, but he's supposed to divorce her. Why would we allow them to eat? So the Rabbi Yochanan asked back, Tanya Yeshla, but I have a brisa that says she does have mezainas. So Rabbi Leza says, you learned it wrong. Ki Tanya hi lachamisa. Again, same bottom line, that only she gets food only after he dies. But while they're married, we want them to get divorced. So we're not going to say, husband, feed her. So therefore, she would not get mezainis while he's alive. Now, Tanu Rabbanan, here's the crux of the issue. Tanu Rabbanan, Amana l'koyin gadol, Grusha chalutza l'koyin hedyet. So then, yesh la ksuba, peres, mezainis, bloyes, right? If a mana marries a mana to a kohen gadol, grusha to a kohen hedyet, she has ksuba, peres, mezainis, and everything. V'hi psula, but as soon as he has relations with her, she becomes disqualified from ever marrying a kohen. She becomes like a zionist. She made a bias isser. Vlad apostle. And if they have a child, again, a grusha to a kohen hedyet, simple, the child becomes a chalal, is not a kosher kohen. The kohen oisla hoitzin, we divorce this guy to give a divorce, again, but they have ksuba. Now, a grusha to marry a kohen hedyet is asa daraisa, and nevertheless, we force the husband, when he divorces her, to pay the ksuba. The Gemara says, but shnias midivrei seifrim, let's say somebody married a drabanan erva. For example, he married his mother's mother. So when he divorces her, we also don't want this marriage because it's also midrabanan. Ein lo ksuba, lo peres, lo mezainis, lo blaris. But nevertheless, bi kashera, she doesn't become a zoina by living with her. The grandmother always remains kosher to marry a kohen. Vlada kosher, if they have a child, there's nothing wrong with that child. But nevertheless, the kohen oisla haitzi, we force them to give a divorce because this is an illegal marriage midrabanan. So now comes the home run question. Why is it by an illegal marriage daraisa, when they get divorced, we don't want them to remain married, there's ksuba, she gets the ksuba. And why is it when there's an illegal marriage darabanan, there's no ksuba? Amr Shimon ben Elazar ben Neima Amr. Why did they say Amana le kohen gadol yesh la ksuba? When Amana marries a kohen gadol, illegal marriage, when they get divorced, they get ksuba. So he says, but nay shehu pasal v'ipsula, because they anyway going to get divorced. Why? Because as long as they remain married, guess what? He can't be the kohen gadol. He can't do the service in the temple, and he psula, and she gets pasal because now she becomes she can never marry a kohen. So she can never marry a kohen because she's like a zoina. So therefore, v'chol makam shehu pasal v'ipasla, when they both don't want the marriage. So then we go to Amud Beis, Pedalar Amud Beis, Pehei Amud Beis. Konsul oisei ksuba. They required the husband to give a ksuba. That's what it means. He's required to give a ksuba because it's naturally going to fall apart, this marriage. Why do we say by shniyas midivrei seifrim there is no ksuba? If someone's married to his grandmother, his wife's mother, why is there no ksuba over there when they get divorced? There's no incentive to get divorced over there because he doesn't lose anything by being married to her, and she doesn't lose anything. She remains kosher. She doesn't become a zaina. If she remains kosher and a marriage that she remains kosher, so therefore, what's the only incentive to force them to get out? They knas that when they get divorced, she loses her ksuba. So she's already on unsure ground anymore. So she wants out of the marriage. So that was the ingenious way of the Chachamim forcing a divorce over here in a situation when someone made an illegal marriage, the Rabbanim, where there's no consequences. So there, the Chachamim stepped in and made a consequence that she lose her ksuba. So. And she doesn't want to remain married because if he dies and she doesn't have a ksuba, she's lost. That's why she's going to try to divorce him and try to marry somebody else she will get a ksuba. Rabbi says another difference. Halolu divrei Torah, the divrei Torah ain't tzrichen chizuk. Halolu divrei seifrim, the divrei seifrim tzrichen chizuk. When you make an illegal marriage, minat Torah, Chachamim didn't have to say, you lose your ksuba, because everybody knows this is an illegal marriage minat Torah. When it's an illegal marriage midrabanan, Chachamim sought to publicize that it's asur, and therefore they made the rule that there is no ksuba in that situation. Davar acha, another thing, in this case, in the case of the kohen marrying, let's say the kohen marrying a grusha, who margila, he's the one convincing to get married, because nothing happens to him. Only wrong thing happens to her. She becomes a zionist, but he likes the marriage. So therefore, since he wants the marriage, we force him to pay ksuba when they get divorced. V'zu, and in this case, he margi losai. In this case, she is the one that wants the marriage. By the shnia, she doesn't lose out. And really, she wants the marriage more than him, because a woman wants to get married more than a man. And so in that case, because she's not losing anything out, she wants the marriage. If you want the marriage, therefore, they forced you to lose the ksuba. Okay, so now, Davar Acha Man Ketanila, who is the author of the Davar Acha? Ika the Amar, some say Reb Shimon ben Elazar Ketanila. It's another explanation of Reb Shimon ben Elazar. So, Ma Tam Kamar, he's explaining, Ma Tam Amruhu Possibly Psulo. This third reason of Davar Acha is explaining what Reb Shimon ben Elazar meant to say. What did Chachamim say? Why is it that in the case of Kohen marrying a grusha, who pasal v'hi psula? He's pasal for the avodah, and she's pasal. Kansu Isaac ksuba. They knast him to give the ksuba. Why? Shuhu margilak. He's the one that wants the marriage, because she's losing out of this marriage, because her children become pasal, she becomes pasal. So therefore, he wants the marriage more than her. Umatam, in the other scenario, by the shnia, who kasha v'ikashera, where they both remain kasha, konsu oisa ksuba, they knast ksuba. Why? That he does have to pay ksuba, but same thing. He margilas, as I explained, because she wants the marriage. Since she doesn't lose out by herself or her children, nothing goes wrong. She always remains the same. So there's always a known fact that a woman wants to get married more than a man, and there's no consequences for her, because she always remains kosher and her children remain kosher in this drabanan issa type of marriage. Therefore, we cannot it another way that she lose her ksuba. But equally, others say, Rebbe Kadila. This is Rebbe's davar acha. This davar acha, we have Reb Shimon ben Elazar's case number one, Rebbe in the first section. And now Rebbe gave a davar achar, and he said like this: Rebbe Ketanila. Rebbe said that the difference between grusha to kohen hedyad and shnia is one is daraisa, one is the rabbanan. So, but Rebbe had a problem. If what's the defining difference is whether it's daraisa or the rabbanan, then you have a problem. Why is it chalutza kokashele? Because for a kohen to marry a chalutza type of woman, that's difficult. That is only asur d'rabbanan. But chalutza d'rabbanan. Chalutza is only asur midrabbanan. The isla ksuba, and there is ksuba by her. If you tell me that the defining thing is that anything that's asur midrabbanan needs chizuk, and therefore she loses her ksuba, why is it when a kohen marries a chalutza, they do not lose the ksuba? They do not lose the ksuba. So that's why Rebbe had to come up with a new reason. Hada Omer. Then we said, Kevin the pasula midrabanan. V'zeh hu margila v'zu he margila say. Therefore, since it's pasul mitru midrabanan, she does lose out. By chalutza, she can't eat truma. When a kohen marries a chalutza, she cannot eat truma forever, for the rest of her life, midrabanan. So she doesn't like the marriage. So who's pushing for this marriage? By kohen marrying a chalutza, who margila? He's pushing for the marriage. That's why this ksuba. Bezu, by a regular shnia, he margila, so she wants the marriage because she doesn't lose out, and she wants to get married. She wants to stay married. Okay, new Gemara. Ma ika bein Rebbe Reb Shimon ben Elazar. Okay, and this will take us to the end. Ma'ika Bain, we'll try to do it. Ma'ika Bain Rebbe Rav Shimon ben Elazar. What is the difference between Rebbe and Rav Shimon ben Elazar? Both hold lahalacha that a kohen marrying a grusha, ksuba. There is ksuba when they get divorced. A man marrying a shniya would not have gifts. She loses her ksuba, and they both gave different reasons. So, what would be a case between Rebbe and Rabbi Shimon and Elazar that one would a case where one would get, according to one you get ksuba, and according to the other you would not get ksuba? Amar Rav Chizda gave an example. Mamzeres marrying a Yisrael. Mamzeres Nasil Yisrael. Yisrael marrying a Mamzeres is an illegal marriage midaraisa. Ika b'naya. According to Rebbe, the definitive point is daraisa, as long as it's daraisa. Hanami daraisa. This is daraisa, and you would get ksuba. But according to the opinion that you look at who wants the marriage, in this case, he margila, she wants the marriage. Why would the mamzeres want a marriage to Yisrael? So because even though she knows her children, there's nothing worse than being called a mamzeres. So she's a mamzeres. Nothing bad can happen to her. Worst comes to worst, she'll have a son that's a mamzer. Great. But there's a way that her grandson could be a kosher Jew, because there's a way that if Rab Tarfon gave an advice for a mamzer to be matar himself, to matar his children by marrying a eved. The children now become avodim, and then it's freed. And then they free him, and the grandchildren could eventually become kosher Jews. So she wants the marriage. If she wants the marriage, she loses the ksuba. Says the Gemara, so only because, why does she want the marriage? Because eventually she could have kosher grandchildren. But that's not a good example. She still doesn't want the marriage because the grandkids will remain an eved mamzer and will never become kosher Jews. So she doesn't want the marriage in that case either. So that's not a good example. Rav Yosef gave an example. Machse gerusha. If a man goes back and takes his wife back after she married somebody else, he divorced her, she married somebody else, she got divorced from that guy, and he remarries her. That's a issa derabana. It's a daraisa. Mishnah is the ksuba in that case. Man the amad daraisa, hanami daraisa. Whenever you're even issa daraisa, there is ksuba. Man the amad neshu hu margila. The whole point is who wants the marriage. In this case, the machhi margalale. She wants it because when he marries her again, even he's over alav, but the children are kosher. And anyway, she's a grusha. So she was already puzzled from a kind from before. So she has nothing to lose out. So she wants the marriage because she likes to remain married. So the Gemara says, no. According to Rabbi Kiva, she doesn't either want the marriage because if she marries this guy, if they have children, the kids are going to be mamzer, and that's going to be a source of friction. So she doesn't want to get involved in such a marriage over there. So it's not a good example. Ella, two more possibilities. Ella Marapapa, Ba'ula Lakayan Gadol, Ika Benayo. What happens? A woman who had an affair, let's say a young girl, wasn't married, just slept around, and now she's married to a Kohen Gadol. That is an isser because a Kohen Gadol is supposed to marry a basula, not a ba'ula. And if he married her, what would be in that case? Would there be ksuba? Ma'am de amadai raisa. If the whole point you're even isser daraisa, there's ksuba. Hanami daraisa. This is a daraisa isser, and therefore there would be ksuba. Ma'am de amam neishu margila. The whole point is who wants the marriage? He margalele. She wants the marriage over here because nothing is good, and she's a ba'ula. She couldn't marry. She's a ba'ula, and she's not she doesn't mind marrying because the children are not going to be chalolim. So there's nothing going to be wrong with her children because the only time you can make a chalol is only if you marry a lav, like a grusha or an almana. But if you marry a ba'ula, there is no chalol. So she wants the marriage. So then you would lose the ksuba. So Gemara says no. She doesn't want the marriage either because she's going to have children that are chalalim, and she's going to always be in a fight with this guy because with the Kohen Gadol because they're making bad children, and therefore she's not convincing for the marriage. Ella, final Gemara. Ella, Oma Rav Ashi Machse Safik Soitasi Ika Benayu. Of someone who is trying to have relation with a suffix saita, a woman on their way to drink saita waters. He didn't say, heck with it, I'm not going to drink the saita waters. Let's get back together and remain married. There's an issa daraisa to stay married like that. Man, you're supposed to drink the saita waters. Man, daraisa nami daraisa, there would be ksuba. Over daraisa. Man, nam shumar gila. In this case, hohi margalale. She wants the marriage because why does she want to drink the waters? She wants to stay married. She wants to just go back and not drink the waters and remain married. So since she's convincing of the marriage, she would lose the ksuba. Or Amasiv and Charish the Oma the Gemara asks one last question. In this case, by a suffix saitan, she still needs to drink the saita water. She doesn't want the marriage either. Because if she goes back, not drink the saita waters, but if even her husband having one relation with her makes her a zayna, and in case the husband dies, she can never marry a kohen. So she's not so into this kind of a marriage that she'll have that stigma of not being ever able to marry a kohen as a second marriage in case this one doesn't work out or dies. Let's say a woman didn't come. She doesn't have to drink saita waters. Everybody says she did znus. Everybody saw it. She did znus, and there was no warning. So so really the husband's supposed to divorce her. If the husband stays with her, so he's over in Issa Daraisa. So really there would be ksuba. But according to the Mandi Amma that says he margila, she wants it. She doesn't mind staying married to this guy because the children will not be mamzerim because there's no mamzer on a saita, on somebody like that. The children will be kosher. So she's going to want such a marriage. So therefore, because even Rabbi Kiva, who holds by this chayv and lavim, there's a mamzer, but in this case, b'vo'al saita, since they're originally married, that the child will not be a mamzer. Okay, lot we did today.